Greetings! In today's video, I have miniature creations for you. The first creation is this thing. It's based off of the Decepticon ships in Transformers Dark of the Moon, and it's a very tiny spaceship. I made it to fit inside a large over-complexity carrier creation that is not complete and might never be complete, because all of my above complexity creations just take way too long to do anything on, not only because they're enormous, but also because the computer starts running very slowly and my poor laptop suffers immensely. Anyway, this is just a little fighter. It's agile. It has basically all the necessary and nothing else controls. It has a fair amount of guns because they're piston glitched in, and it has this mode which allows it to become a more VTOL thing, I guess you could describe it that way. The main thing is that this doesn't actually do anything for its controllability. It just allows it to move forward a little bit slower than usual. It doesn't change the properties of the flight at all, or its maneuverability or controllability in any way, shape, or form. It just has the ability to transform sort of like this, because the movie thing also did. That's about it. When I press space, the thrusters angled a little bit in order to give forward momentum. I have the flashing lights on the blasters to simulate some muzzle flash a little bit. This button activates the mad scientist blocks whenever I'm using space to move forward. And number 3 is a turn off button for all of my controls. So basically the two lights start blinking and the downward thrust on the spaceship stops being active so that you can just park it. The second creation is instead a bomber vehicle. The last one was the fighter. This is the bomber. It's even more simple. It doesn't have any parking brake. It doesn't have any mad scientist blocks. It controls exactly the same as the fighter spaceship. It's not necessarily based off anything. It's just shaped like a bullet because I decided that I wanted a bomber shaped like a bullet. And it's incredibly tiny, and it has an obscene amount of firepower for just, you know, being a bullet with thrusters. It's incredibly fun to dogfight with because there are very few hits other than the occasional EMP. And so if you're dogfighting with two of these, if you get rocket hits, actually damaging rocket hits, it's extremely rare and exhilarating. Other than that, you can try to essentially maneuver kill your opponent by EMPing their gyros and having them collapse into the ocean. That's mostly what's going on. And then I can shoot myself, apparently. That hasn't happened. Actually, I lie. That has happened at least once or twice, but not very often. And very comedically whenever it does happen. Especially in dogfights, exploding yourself is like, yeah, that was funny. The third creation for today is this bird thing. The reason I made this is because Yidify made a plane and it had flaming pieces on it to simulate damage essentially, and then he attempted to go all out with that and basically added so many sconces that the plane looked like it was completely on fire and he was flying it overhead of me. And that reminded me of a scene in a video game that was recreated in Blender. I will attempt to, when I'm editing, grab the URL for that video so that you guys can go check it out for yourself. But it was a recreation in Blender of a World of Warcraft dragon, I believe, whose wings had set on fire and it was flying over a stretch of land and it was just leaving a giant fire trail behind it. So that's what I attempted to create with this, is I have my gliding, and I can leave a giant trail of fire, and I can flap my wings to leave a giant trail of fire, essentially. And of course I have blasters, because why not? But this is indeed the main spectacle. It's just a small build that I was experimenting this effect with some flapping animation and a giant trail of flame behind me. Not very complex at all, just fire. So, the second last creation for today is a tiny, tiny car. It's even tinier than I'm used to making. This is the huggorm, which I was supposed to mean rattlesnake, but Google Translate lied to me, and it doesn't mean rattlesnake apparently, but it's a different venomous snake of some kind. So I will be okay with naming it that. I'm pulling out a different car just to illustrate how absolutely minuscule this thing is. Just to illustrate how absolutely tiny this supercar-ish thing is. This is like, I've basically took the chassis of a regular car as I usually make them, and I shrunk it by 10%, 7%. I attempted to make it smaller because I noticed that my usual cars don't look supercar-ish enough. And one of the things that I was looking at when I was paying attention to images of very fast and very unreasonable cars is that their wheels are basically the entire height of the car minus the seating section. So I was attempting to basically squish the cars down even further so that the wheels would appear bigger on them and give more of that supercar-ish look. It didn't work perfectly well, however, I'm interested with the result that I've obtained, and I'm very happy with the performance of this car. Another thing that happened is because I was making the car smaller, I actually reduced its width and made it into an even width car rather than an odd width. I applied a bunch of attempts to make it racing worthy with its arrow in the back. I have the reactive arrow, and I did a bunch of detailing on the backside, and then I just made it in several different shades of colors. This specific shade of purple is because Wemplar was around when I was making this, and I just decided to make him a specific version of the car, and because we were having fun racing with several different vehicles around the race island tracks that have the new island tracks that have been added. It has an obscene amount of lighting, I am happy to say, and it has the red lights specifically that are on the inside. They are there to indicate to me that the helicopter engine on the inside of the vehicle has been activated to allow it to drift, because I decided that my supercar should drift. Now, that was arguably not the most intelligent decision I've ever made. However, I'm not known for my extremely intelligent decisions. Now, yes, the supercar can drift. However, whenever it's not in drift mode, it does handle very well, and I've successfully been competitive at races with this car against people such as Wemplar and Yidify, who are definitely better drivers than I am. So I'm happy with it. I'm really happy with it. All of the color variations are extremely nice as well, and I just enjoy this car a lot. As you can see, I have 4 of them. The final creation for today is this thing. It's a hellfire droid, or an imitation of such, from Star Wars The Battle for Geonosis? Yes? What's the name of the movie? The Clone Wars? No. Clone something. Attack of the Clones. That's the name of the movie. There you go. So so before I start talking to you about the build specifically, I built this thing, which is a circle and as you can see, there's thrusters in it because it was supposed to become a spaceship. Actually, it's supposed to be is a lie. It did become a spaceship, and I was not happy with that spaceship, so I have two versions of that spaceship, and I will show you them in the future. However, I just took big wheel thing because I built it. I ripped the gyro module out from this flappy thing and stuck it onto this very round thing. And then I realized that I had made a wheel, and Yeetify was like, you should make that into a mono wheel. And my brain was like, I could do that, but also I could do this, which I would say is not nearly as simplistic, but it's basically the same concept. I was just having fun with this thing. It's got thruster assistance. It can technically fly if I wanted to fly because of how it spawns. Its wheels are flat to the ground, which means that when it spawns, Trailmakers tends to bump it really high up in the air. So I decided to add in thrusters underneath to slow its descent so that every time it spawned in, it wouldn't immediately break itself. And then because I could, I made it fly. That's my reasoning. Aside from that, it's just this. It just rolls around very happily, and it has no technical weaponry. Like, it can't do any damage to you, but it can fire its barrage of quote-unquote missiles, which are fireworks. And one thing that's very amusing about it is that if you're just firing the fireworks straight forward, they go there. Instead, if you're moving forward, because of how the wheel's momentum is, it actually angles the center of the vehicle upward, and the fireworks have more range when moving forward. And so that's just fun, and I like it. But yeah, that's my mini Hellfire droid. And there you go. That's been my showcase of tiny builds in Trailmakers. I hope you've enjoyed. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the future.